The static in the air. The broadcast was supposed to be over. The copyright logo had already flashed in the bottom corner of the screen, signaling the end of another standard Friday night SmackDown. The main event winner was celebrating on the turnbuckle. The music was blaring, and the production team was already cueing the replays. But then the audio didn't just fade out. Cut. It wasn't the smooth transition into a commercial or a black screen, but a harsh, jarring snap of silence that made millions of viewers at home check their remotes. In the arena, the atmosphere shifted instantly from celebration to confusion. The Titantron, usually vibrant with motion graphics, flickered into a dead, static gray. It wasn't the polished static of a planned vignette or a supernatural character's gimmick. It looked like a genuine technical failure. The house lights didn't dim dramatically. They simply shut off in banks, uneven and clumsy, leaving the ring bathed in a weak emergency-style amber glow. You could feel the unease rippling through the crowd. This wasn't the excited murmur of fans anticipating a surprise. It was the nervous shuffling of people wondering if something had actually gone wrong. The commentary team, usually so quick to sell a moment, remained completely silent. There were no breathless exclamations from Michael Cole, no witty remarks from Corey Graves. It's just the ambient sound of 20,000 people realizing that the script had seemingly been discarded. The camera operators didn't zoom in. They pulled back, their lenses shaking slightly, searching for a focal point that wasn't there. It felt voyeuristic, like we were watching a private moment of failure rather than a global television show. The air in the arena grew heavy, suffocatingly quiet, as if the oxygen had been sucked out by the sudden vacuum of entertainment. We weren't watching a show anymore. We were witnessing an interruption. The uninvited guest? From the shadows of the entrance ramp, a figure emerged without music, pyro, or fanfare. There was no grand lighting cue to announce their arrival, only the rhythmic, heavy thud of boots against the hollow metal of the stage. The silhouette was nondescript, clad in street clothes that looked worn and travel-heavy, a stark contrast to the polished spandex and glitter of the WWE Universe. As the figure walked through the amber haze, the crowd's reaction was a chaotic mix of recognition and denial. It started as a low rumble, a collective intake of breath, before fracturing into pockets of stunned silence and isolated, confused shouting. This wasn't the pop of a returning hero. It was the unsettling noise of a ghost walking into a room where they were no longer welcome. The camera finally focused, struggling with the low light to reveal the face. It was a face aged by resentment, eyes devoid of the usual performative intensity wrestlers wear for the cameras. This person wasn't playing a character. He looked exhausted, dangerous, and completely out of place. As they walked down the ramp, they didn't slap hands with fans or acknowledge the hard cam. They stared straight ahead, focused entirely on the ring with a predatory, uncomfortable fixity. The commentary feed crackled to life, but it wasn't a rehearsed line. It was a hot mic catching a genuine whisper of disbelief, a trembling "they're not supposed to be here" that sounded more like a security breach warning than a broadcast call. The wrestler in the ring, previously celebrating, froze. Their smile vanished, replaced by a look of legitimate concern. This was the moment the suspension of disbelief shattered. The barrier between the performance and the reality of a volatile past had just been breached, and the silence in the arena was deafening. The stare down. The intruder slid under the bottom rope, a motion so casual, yet so invasive, that it felt like a violation of the sacred canvas. There was no theatrical pose, no demand for a microphone. They simply stood up, dusting off their hands, and walked to the center of the ring. The champion, who had been holding their title belt high just moments ago, slowly lowered it, clutching the gold against their chest like a shield. The two figures stood feet apart, bathed in that sickly emergency light. The audience, usually desperate to start a chant, remained paralyzed. The tension wasn't built on the promise of a fight. It was built on the threat of a conversation that no one was prepared to hear. The returning figure looked at the champion not with competitive fire, but with a pitiable disdain, a look that said the belt, the fame, and the cheers were all meaningless constructs. For a terrifying 30 seconds, nothing happened. No punches were thrown, no finishers were teased. It was just human contact in its rawest, most uncomfortable form. The intruder reached out, not to strike, but to touch the title belt. The champion flinched, a genuine reflex of fear that the cameras caught in high definition. The intruder smiled, a cold, humorless expression, and then turned their back on the champion. It was a dismissal more painful than any physical attack. They looked directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall with chilling intimacy, and mouthed a single, unintelligible phrase before the screen abruptly cut to black. There was no copyright logo this time, no WWE Forever signature. Just a hard cut to commercial, leaving millions of viewers sitting in the dark, wondering if what they just saw was part of the show or a legitimate collapse of control. The locker room fallout. When the feed cut, the chaos backstage was immediate and uncontained. The gorilla position, usually a hub of organized direction, had dissolved into frantic shouting. Producers ripped off headsets, screaming for security that was slow to respond because even the security team was unsure if this was a work. In the locker room, the monitors showing the feed had gone dark, leaving the roster in a state of stunned murmuring. The unspoken rule of the wrestling business is that you protect the fiction, but the fiction had just been held hostage. Veterans who had seen everything sat in silence, recognizing the look in the returnees' eyes, the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. This wasn't a storyline pitched in a writer's room. This carried the weight of real-life grievances, lawsuits, and burnt bridges that were never meant to be rebuilt. The younger talent looked to the leaders for reassurance, but found none. The blurred line between reality and script is where wrestling thrives, but it is also where it is most dangerous. The returning star walked back through the curtain, not toward the locker room, but toward the exit door, bypassing the entire roster without a word. They didn't stop to explain, didn't stop to shake hands, and didn't stop to acknowledge the furious executives storming toward them. The hallway cleared as they walked, a physical manifestation of the toxicity they brought with them. The silence they left in their wake was heavier than the noise of the arena. This wasn't about heat. It was about fear. The locker room realized that the hierarchy had shifted not because of a booking decision, but because a volatile element had forced its way back into the ecosystem, and nobody knew how to contain the fallout. The lingering question? The show ended, but the story didn't. Social media didn't explode with excitement. It exploded with analysis, conspiracy theories, and genuine concern. The brilliance of the moment lay in its refusal to provide closure. We are conditioned to expect instant gratification, a match announcement, a beatdown, a clear explanation of why, but this return gave us nothing but anxiety. It stripped away the polish of the WWE product and reminded us that at its core, this industry is built on ego, conflict, and deeply broken people. The shock wasn't that they returned. The shock was that the machine seemed powerless to stop it. We were left with the uncomfortable realization that perhaps the script isn't as ironclad as we think it is. This wasn't a viral moment designed for clicks. It was a psychological anchor dropped into the calm waters of the current era. It forced the audience to look at the current champion and see them not as a superhero, but as a vulnerable performer standing across from a legitimate threat. As the dust settled, the question wasn't who will win the match. The question was far more primal and disturbing. What is going to happen next? And is anyone actually in control? That lingering doubt is the most powerful emotion wrestling can evoke. We didn't just see a return. We saw the cracks in the facade. And once you see the cracks, you can never look at the structure the same way again. The show is over, but the feeling of dread remains, proving that the scariest stories are the ones that feel like they weren't meant to be told.